Hello, and welcome to Prince George's Youth Leading on the Issues. I am your host, Ava Spires. Thank you for tuning in. We have an exciting show for you today. My guests are members of the East Coast chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, Miss Robin Alexander and Mr. Jerome Hodge. Stay tuned. I will be right back with our first guest. Hello, and welcome back to Prince George's Youth Leading on the Issues. Thank you for tuning in. Joining me first is Miss Robin Alexander from the East Coast chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, ECTI. Supports the national goals of Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated to motivate, inspire, and stimulate young people's minds to aspire to, seek, and achieve successful careers in the field of aviation and aerospace. Thank you, Ms. Alexander, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell us about the history of the Tuskegee Airmen and why that history should be important to us.
Well, even at your tender age, I'm sure you know that things weren't always as easy in society. We didn't all get along as well as we do even now, for all the faults of the way we get along now. Black people, Negroes as they were called before, did not have equal opportunity, did not have equal housing, were not generally allowed to share much in the advantages that America had to offer. However, when the Great Depression hit the United States, everybody suffered. And lots of people had to start over, lots of people had to learn to struggle. Black people were accustomed to that. And while they didn't have any jobs either, they were pretty adept at managing. We had to go through the Depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt got elected president, and he grew up wealthy and privileged, but he had been around. He knew how to treat people. He also was getting a lot of pressure as the Depression ended. He helped bring this country out of the Depression with all the public works programs and what have you. And then World War II started, and the United States really didn't want to get into World War II. They'd already been through World War I. But he realized that, it was eventually going to happen, and a lot of people did. The NAACP, and notably the black press in the United States, the Afro-American, the Black Journal, every different community had, well, not everyone, but a lot of large cities at least had black newspapers that printed news that was particularly relevant and covered the black social scene. They were pressuring the president to integrate the armed forces. Not many people wanted that to happen. There had always been resistance to having black soldiers, as you learned from the movie Glory. And black combat units were always singular, all black. For World War II, the Army was going to make use of this relatively new instrument that just sort of came into being and common military use in World War I, and that was airplanes. Mm-hmm. They were training, and of course they were training lots of white pilots, and they had some already for their various planes. But Germany had a much more sophisticated program. We knew we were going to have to meet them in the air. So they were beefing up the aviation program in the Army. There was no Air Force at that time. It was the Army Air Corps that was being developed. And the NAAC and these other groups of people were urging the president to include blacks in that, to give them an opportunity to learn to fly military aircraft. It was a common trope of the times that blacks had neither the mental agility nor the courage to fly combat aircraft. It was too technical, too difficult, and for some reason or other, they assumed we were cowards. In any event, Eleanor Roosevelt, and you've probably learned this in history classes, pressured her husband to create a black training corps for American military air power. And so they started, there were several black colleges that offered some aviation training. Not many black people could fly or had access to flying programs, but there were some colleges that had training programs. Tuskegee, Alabama was one of them. Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama, had an airfield, and they had a training program. And several black schools, you know, it's sort of a bidding process. We're bidding for the opportunity to participate in this. By whatever methods of measurement they were taking, they chose Tuskegee. The brass at the Pentagon chose Tuskegee. They had an airfield, and a new one was being built called Moton Field. And they decided that that would be the ideal place to train the blacks. And so they started the program there. And many people expected, especially people in the military, expected the black cadets to fail. And for some people, it was probably their expectation, and it was just an opportunity to shut everybody up, saying, see, we told you. But it didn't work out that way. Fortunately, they found the leader for the Tuskegee training program, the cadet program, in Noel Parrish, a white officer who had had to come up through the ranks and who had always gotten along well and actually advocated for more full inclusion of black people into American society. And while he was not all that great shakes as a pilot, I read somewhere, he was an excellent administrator, and he was a fair and honest man. And he made sure all the trainers, all the other white officers at Tuskegee Airfield, at Moton Field, taught their charges everything they knew, that they were there to help them succeed. Young black men from all over the country heard about this program, and there were kids, I brought a bunch of books and stuff. There were kids all over who grew up watching airplanes and pointing to them and just thinking, oh, I want to fly, I want to fly. And then when they learned that the military was going to train blacks to fly, they swarmed. They just wanted the program. They had trouble enlisting for it because many of the recruiters either couldn't believe there was such a program or just didn't want to pass any people through to it. But eventually, they got them in there. They got enough in there to make up a squadron, because from the beginning, everybody knew that a black flying unit was going to have to be fully supported by black people. Black crewmen, mechanics, groundsmen, administrators, even the medical staff that serviced them had to be black. So when you talk about a Tuskegee Airman, is someone who went through the Tuskegee experience between 1942 and 1947 when they closed the field down. Whether as a secretary, a nurse, a doctor, a mechanic, or a pilot, or a bombardier. The first class to graduate was in 42. I think it was 42C, which meant they graduated in March of 42, the third month of the year. And And then they graduated classes, you know, every so many months later on. The first ones to actually get shipped out to war went to North Africa, where they spent a lot of time further training and polishing the planes and making sure everything was right, because the generals really didn't want them that much, and they weren't given many assignments. And eventually some criticism came down from the Pentagon saying, you guys aren't shooting down any enemy pilots. They said, you haven't put us near any enemy pilots. Why don't you let us go do it? Anyway, so they finally started sending them to escort the white bomber pilots from their bases on their missions. The Tuskegee Airmen would send up their planes to meet the bomber pilots en route. And
Thank you. I have another question for you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Why did you become a member of the Tuskegee Airmen Institute?
My father was one. My father was what we call a DOTA, a Documented Original Tuskegee Airman. When the first classes went out and were sent to North Africa as fighter pilots, he chose to stay at the base for multi-engine training. He had hoped to fly a commercial airline after the war, so he needed to be able to fly big planes with more than one engine, not the lighter, swifter, more versatile fighters. That didn't work out for him, but because he was a bomber pilot, he spent the entire war flying around the United States with sandbags in his bomb bay. And his greatest claim to flying fame was a dead stick landing when both his engines gave out. And he had called ahead to some base in Kentucky, and they'd said, you know, runway of your choice. It was a naval air base. And he landed the plane so beautifully. The tower radioed and said, you can't park out there. Bring that thing on in here. And he says, you got to come tow me. I got no engines left. On his way down, however, he had told his crew, was flying with a full bomber crew. And he had said, per protocol, as soon as that second engine quits, because one already had, and they'd found a place to land, he said, as soon as the second engine quits, you guys bail out. And they said, what are you going to do, Alec? He said, I'm going to put this plane on the ground. And they said, well, we're staying with you. My dad always treasured the confidence that his crew showed in him. Anyway, they landed. A black crew had to come from Godman Field, I think they'd flown from, and repair their plane and then get it taken back. They were sent back that night. But that was his story, that why he stayed in to be a multi-engine pilot. And you know, I ended up accompanying him to a couple of meetings, and I decided I might as well join.
So if I am correct, you joined because of your father's inspirational deeds?
His inspirational deeds, the fact that he was, you know, getting up there in years. He needed someone to accompany him to these meetings. He had had a hip replacement, and traveling wasn't all that easy for him anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Alexander, joining us and explaining the mission of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated and sharing your father's legacy. Coming up after these messages, we will learn about the Youth and Aviation Program, which is a great opportunity for the Prince George's County youth this school year. Stay tuned.
We serve the entire state of Missouri.
On the west side of Chicago.
We serve families that live in Washington, D.C.
Prevention is at the core, whether that's mental health, physical health, school readiness.
Drugs, alcohol, mental health, suicide,
Underage drinking and tobacco use. Marijuana, all the way up to opioids, cocaine. If it's a drug, we are there to try and prevent it.
National Prevention Week is a celebration of all the things that happen all year long.
Some of our National Prevention Week activities have been focusing on the illegal drugs, illegal use of opioids.
Prevention is about saving lives.
This is where it happens.
This is where it happens.
This is where it happens. This is Prevention at Work.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with me. Now joining me in the studio is Mr. Jerome Hodge from the East Coast chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. Welcome, Mr. Hodge.
Thanks
for joining me today on PGY. Tell us about the Youth in Aviation program sponsored by ECTI.
Well, the Tuskegee Airmen, the East Coast chapter of Tuskegee Airmen, has a dynamic aviation program where we're using the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen to teach young people about STEM, using aviation, which is what we know. We train them to be both pilots, we expose them to pilots, and also through aviation maintenance and other ventures and avenues within the aviation curriculum.
Thank you. What kind of skills do kids gain from the program?
Well, like I said, we really push the STEM, science, technology, math, those kinds of skills, and we use aviation. For instance, we've got a 3-tier program where we initially take kids and we expose them to, we take them to air traffic control towers, we take them to the various airports, we take them to the Uvalde, which is one of the biggest and best aviation museums in the world. And then after that, the second step of that is we actually take our kids and we run them through an actual full-fledged ground school where they're prepared to learn all of the aspects of what it takes to be a pilot from a ground standpoint. And those that actually pass the FAA writtens, then in the summertime, we actually will take them out and we guarantee them a minimum of 15 hours of flying time, where they actually go out and fly with an instructor, and then with the hope of being able to get them to solo, during the summertime during that flying experience. The other part of our program is we've got an active maintenance program where we actually take kids and we bring them out to the airport and we actually expose them from a maintenance standpoint, what's actually being done, where we actually physically work on aircraft, and they get to decide and see, what's involved from that end from a maintenance standpoint also.
Okay. I attend Awakenings Preparatory Academy. Would you host us to see the program in action?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be glad for you to come out to the airport and to our hangar, and I'll show you everything that we're doing, both from an airplane standpoint and a maintenance standpoint, and we'll even get a couple airplanes to get you up on.
What advice do you have for young people today?
My best advice, obviously, is education. And that's what we want to do. We want to take aviation, which is what we know, and we want to pique our kids' interest and show them that there's various and lots of things that, that we're not necessarily do. We don't see a lot of black pilots. We don't see a lot of black aircraft mechanics and FAA controllers and folks that not just in those few areas, but everything from flight attendants to everything with transportation. And we want to expose our kids that those jobs are out there. They're well-paying jobs. They're skill sets that they can learn. And so that's where the science, the technology, the math, those kind of skill sets come into play. Show you where you can end up by just staying in school and concentrating a little bit.
Tell our audience about your business, Avdyne Aero Services.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm the owner and operator of Avdyne Aero Services. We are an aviation maintenance company. We're a certified FAA, which is the authority here in the U.S. that certifies, both the pilots and the trainers and the mechanics. We're a certified facility. We're located at all 3 airports in D.C. We're at Reagan, Washington Dulles, and Washington Dulles. And we provide maintenance support for airlines. We also provide maintenance support, if you own your own small individual airplane or a corporate jet. So I've got about 60 mechanics working for me between the 3 locations, and we've got a hangar and a facility. And that's where I want you guys to come out and see part of what we do.
Okay. What was your goal when you started?
Oh, my goal, I was 13, 14 years old, and I looked up and saw airplanes, and I knew I was going to have something to do. So I joined the Air Force, and I actually spent 21 years active duty Air Force, retired, working on airplanes and flying throughout the whole time frame. And so I knew that airplanes was in my blood, so I started out working for a company, and then the opportunity came along where I was able to start my own company, and I jumped all over it.
Wow.
So.
Where do you find inspiration, and what inspired you to start your business? You answered part of that question.
Well, I'll tell you, I actually met Chappie James, and there's a book here on the table that talks about it, when I was in the active duty Air Force. And Chappie has a saying, he says that when opportunity comes along, when the training opportunity comes along, you don't have time to get prepared. What you do in life prepares you, for what comes. And I'm a firm believer in that. I believe that all your experiences, in life are preparing you for what you go. And that's why I talk to kids on a regular basis and say, look, what you're doing now is preparing you for where you want to go and what you want to do. And so that's why we feel it's so important that we take and we expose our kids from an aviation standpoint, to what's out there. We're talking about jobs that, as an aircraft technician, you can go work anywhere in the world that starting pay is almost $50,000 a year just to start.
How do you get your customers?
Well, it's really good. I mean, we're kind of limited. If you own an airplane, then you're a customer of ours. So that anybody flying into one of the 3 airports that we talk about, if they've got a maintenance issue, if there's a problem with the airplane, then they call us. And same thing when our airline partners, we've got various airlines that we work on the airplanes. I know you've ever been on an airplane and they say, hey, we've got a small maintenance issue, we're going to get the mechanic out here. And those 3 airports, one of the airlines, we'd be the ones to show up, to resolve that problem so that the airplane can continue on.
Wow. And one more thing. This is just off the top of my head. What do you think would inspire younger kids like me to do this?
Well, I think that if I ever got you up and had you fly the airplane and actually control it, and you got to see, from a bird's eye sitting in that pilot seat, what that would like, that alone would inspire you. That you would say, whatever I have to do this, that alone would make it so that you'd want to focus down and do whatever it took to make sure that would happen.
What was the best advice you ever received?
I guess the best advice I receive is don't let other people determine, what you want to do or what you want to be. For me, if you tell me I can't do something, that's probably the biggest motivator because I want to try to prove you wrong. So I would say that, you follow your dreams, you follow your path, you set your own star, and then you do whatever it takes to reach out and maintain and get that. That's what the Tuskegee Airmen did. We stand on the backs of what they did.
If you could change one thing in the world, just one, what thing would it be?
Ooh, that's a good question. If I could change one thing in the world, there's a lot of people would say a lot of lofty things like, poverty and that kind of thing. I guess for me it would be the fact that I would want to expose all the kids, especially kids that look like you and like me, to help them to see, what the possibilities are. A lot of times we grow up in neighborhoods and areas where they see a 25 or 30 block area and they don't see what the opportunities are outside of that. I want them to see that there's a world out there, and that there's a world out there that they can be exposed to and take advantage of.
That makes a lot of sense. Knowing what you know now, if you have just one piece of advice for a young person just starting out, what would it be?
Oh, a lot of temptations out there. A lot of things that could kind of throw you off track. I want you to set your mind on what you want to do, and don't let anybody else, be a leader. And by being a leader, you be a trendsetter. And so rather than being a follower and let other people determine where you want to go and maybe sidetrack your dreams and what you want to do, you want to step out and go direct for what you want. And then you'll find that you got people following you because you're leading.
Okay, so this one is another one on the top of my head. What is the most challenging part of running your business?
Ooh, that's a good question. People, the most satisfying part of my job is people, and the most challenging part of my job is people. You know, because people have, you know, they deal with everything in life, all the life's issues. You know, and for me, you know, like I said, I've got 60 employees, and that means 60 families, you know, that are dependent on what we do. You know, so, you know, my job, I work for the folks that, you know, that work for me effectively.
What do you enjoy the most about running your business?
I guess the fact that, you know, even though all of my airline customers are my bosses, and the people I report to as far as the families of my bosses, it kind of gives me the ability to step out there and, you know, and affect some change in different ways, you know.
What would you do with unlimited resources, including funds?
Oh, I let my wife answer that one. For me, it would be, like I said, I would, you know, we're in the process. One of the things that we're trying to do is we're also trying to start an aircraft maintenance school. We're in the process of starting the A&P school right out there in Baltimore, where we have our location. And I want to provide the ability for kids, you know, young kids, men and women. And I've got both men and women that work for me as mechanics. You know, the ability to be able to get to take advantage of that education, you know, not have to worry about where the money's going to come from, you know, be able to pay for that. So scholarships and endowments would be a great thing.
So I really love this book. Have you ever read this?
The Black Titans, yes, I have. The story of the
Can
Tuskegee
you
Airmen.
talk a little bit about that before we have to wrap it up, sadly?
Well, you know, one of the things is Robin talked about a little bit earlier about, you know, what the Tuskegee Airmen went through and the experiences that they had, you know, and the fact that, you know, the original intent was for them not to succeed, you know. But what people have forgotten is that black people have been involved in every war and every fight that's come along since the beginning. We've been involved and we excel. You know, we do what we do and we do it well. And what the Tuskegee Airmen proved is that unlike what other people think that we can or can't do, you know, as long as we set our mind and we go to excel, you know, we go out and we make things happen, and we make things happen from an excellent standard, an excellent way, you know.
So this goes back to your inspiring question. It's not a question, it's more like something that I felt. PGY is here to inspire, and I believe that your motives for like inspiring young people, giving them a better education, exposing them to all these good things instead of exposing them to like the news and all the mass shootings and all that, and showing them there is good in the world, I believe that is very good, and that's what PGY is here to do.
Great.
Last question, really quick. Where do you see your business in 5 years?
Well, I mean, we're growing. We're going after, you know, we like I said, we're in 3 locations. We're looking at a couple other locations to potentially open. I'm working with a partner on the West Coast, you know, to expand that footprint, and we're looking at Africa as a potential next location.
It has been wonderful to talk with you today. I am really excited to visit your program and show our viewers all the wonderful opportunities to learn about the field of aviation here in Prince George's County. Most importantly, thank you for your service to our country. It looks like it's time to wrap up the show. I want to thank our guests, Mrs. Alexandra and Mr. Hodge from the East Coast chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. Thank you for joining me today on Prince George's Youth Leading on the Issues. Thank you for what you are doing in the community. Please keep us posted on upcoming events. We appreciate your efforts. We here at Prince George's Youth Leading on the Issues would like to thank all of our crew members for working hard behind the scenes to make this a great show. We thank our viewers for tuning in. Please keep watching. PGY is here to educate, motivate, inspire, and uplift all of our youth. I'm Ava Spires. See you next time on PGY.